This video will discuss the importance of GDP in the economy. It will explain what GDP is, how it is calculated, and why it is important. The video will also discuss some of the limitations of GDP as a measure of economic well-being. The gross domestic product, GDP, is a measure of the total value of goods and services produced in a country in a given year. GDP is often used as a measure of economic growth and prosperity. However, GDP is not a perfect measure of economic well-being. In this video, we will discuss the importance of GDP in the economy, how it is calculated, and why it is important. We will also discuss some of the limitations of GDP as a measure of economic well-being. First, let's understand what GDP is. GDP is a measure of the total value of goods and services produced in a country in a given year. It is calculated by adding up the value of all final goods and services produced within a country's borders, plus the value of net exports, exports minus imports. GDP can be used to measure economic growth. Economic growth is the increase in the amount of goods and services produced in a country over time. GDP can also be used to measure economic prosperity. Economic prosperity is the level of material well-being in a country. GDP is calculated using the following formula. GDP equals C plus I plus G plus NX, where C equals consumption, I equals investment, G equals government spending, NX equals net exports. Consumption is the total amount of goods and services that households buy in a given year. Investment is the total amount of money that businesses spend on new equipment and buildings in a given year. Government spending is the total amount of money that the government spends on goods and services in a given year. Net exports are the value of exports minus the value of imports in a given year. Now let's understand the importance of GDP. GDP is important because it is a measure of the overall health of an economy. A high GDP indicates that an economy is producing a lot of goods and services, which means that people are employed and businesses are making money. A low GDP indicates that an economy is not producing as many goods and services, which means that people are losing jobs and businesses are not making as much money. GDP is also important because it is used to calculate other economic indicators, such as the unemployment rate and the inflation rate. The unemployment rate is the percentage of the labor force that is unemployed. The inflation rate is the rate at which prices for goods and services are rising. Limitations of GDP. GDP is not a perfect measure of economic well-being. Some of the limitations of GDP include: GDP does not take into account the distribution of income. A country with a high GDP may have a large gap between the rich and the poor. GDP does not take into account the quality of life. A country with a high GDP may have a lot of pollution and a poor environment. GDP does not take into account the value of leisure time. A country with a high GDP may have people who work long hours and have little free time. GDP is an important measure of economic activity, but it is not a perfect measure of economic well-being. Other factors, such as the distribution of income, the quality of life, and the value of leisure time, should also be considered when evaluating the economic health of a country. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more informative content.